Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Sukkah Daf Chof Tes is the last daf in the second parak of Maseches Sukkah. It ends off the parak discussing when is time to leave the sukkah because of rain or discomfort. It discusses the Gemara's mashal of how when it rains in the sukkah it's a bad sign, and then it discusses an agadata about other bad signs, specifically focusing on when there's an eclipse of the sun or the moon and what it means and what type of averas bring various negative incidents. That ends the parak. Now we'll begin the next parak, Lulav Agazal, which introduces us to the halachos of the Daled Minim, starting with the lulav and what the types of psul there are for a lulav. So let's begin the Gemara. The Gemara had said that when the rain falls to the extent that it messes up a dish that's supposed to have a thick consistency, when it gets too much water in it, then it's time to leave the sukkah. So the Gemara specifies, there's a brayso that says that we're not just talking about any dish, we're talking about grisin, which is a kind of barley stew, and there, if it gets just a little bit of water in it, it's already not worth eating. The Gemara records an incident. Abaye was sitting in front of Rav Yosef in the sukkah. Rav Yosef was his Rebbe, and the wind started to blow, and the pieces of schach started falling from the schach into the food. So Rav Yosef said, let's get out of here, wrap up the food and the plates and bring it inside. So Abaye said, but what do you mean? It's not raining. And we said the halacha is when it starts to rain enough that it messes up the food. So Rav Yosef said, I have aninus hadas, I am very mafunik, I cannot handle a lot of discomfort, and therefore this to me is on that level of that discomfort that it would be for everybody else. Now the Gemara discusses with the brayso what happens if you leave the sukkah because of rain, and then the rain stops when you have to go back. So the Gemara says if you're eating a meal in the sukkah and you go inside because it starts raining, you can finish the meal inside, you don't have to go back outside even if it stops. If you're sleeping in the sukkah and you come inside because it was raining, and then it stops raining, you don't have to go back out until Ad Sheyair. Ad Sheyair, the Gemara says, could mean two things. Ad Sheyair with an ayin would mean until he wakes up, and Ad Sheyair with an aleph would mean until the sky gets light. So which is it? The Gemara says there's a different brayso that says Ad Sheyair ve'yala murashachar, until it's Yair and the dawn breaks. So the Gemara says, if it means until it gets light, it can't be until it gets light and the dawn breaks, because it gets light well after the dawn breaks. It must be referring to after he wakes up. And it says you need both things to happen. He has to wake up, and it has to be morning already. If it's morning and he's sleeping, you don't have to wake him up. And if he's up, but it's the middle of the night, he can go back to sleep. He doesn't have to get out of bed. Okay. Now the Gemara moves on. We've seen that the Mishnah brought a mashal. The Mishnah said that if it starts raining when you're in the sukkah, it's like a servant who brings his master a cup of water and he throws it in his face. The Gemara said, who throws what in whose face? The master throws it in the servant's face to tell him, I don't want your water? Or it's like the servant was trying to pour a cup and he spilled it on the master's face by accident. Either way, it's a bad sign. Either way, he's showing that he did a bad job. But just we want to understand what does the Mishnah mean. So Gemara brings a brayso that says that the master pours the water on the servant's face and says, I don't want your service. So that's what we're referring to. Okay, now the Gemara brings a brayso which discusses a list of braysos which discuss evil omens. Specifically, we begin with eclipses. So the first brayso begins and says when there is a solar eclipse, this is a bad sign for the entire world. It's like when the king makes a suda for his servants, and then he says he gets upset with them, so he takes away the light, and he says, make them sit in the darkness. So Kadosh Baruch Hu took away the sunlight that he gave us, even for a brief time, is a bad sign. Another brayso, Rabbi Meir says, any time that either of the heavenly lights are eclipsed is a bad sign for Saneim Shel Yisrael, which refers to Klal Yisrael. And the reason is because whenever anything bad is going on, Klal Yisrael has to fear. The mashal he gives is when a teacher comes to school with a stick, who's the one who's afraid? The one who always gets hit. Now that the teacher has a stick, it's going to be worse. But somebody who doesn't usually get hit, the goody-goody doesn't need to worry. So Klal Yisrael is often bearing the brunt of a lot of the negative things that happen in the world, and therefore we need to be concerned. Another brayso the Gemara says when there is any solar eclipse, that's a bad sign for Levdi Chavim. When there's a lunar eclipse, it's a bad sign for Saneim Shel Yisrael, referring to Klal Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael keep their calendar based on the moon, and therefore they are moon dependent, and the Levdi Chavim keep their calendar based on the sun. Now, where is the sun? What type of indication is that? So the Gemara says, if it is in the east when it's eclipsed, it's a bad sign for the people in the east. If it's in the west when it's eclipsed, it's a bad sign for the people in the west. If it's in the middle of the sky, it's a bad sign for the entire world, because then it's giving light to everybody. Now, the Gemara says, what happens if the sun gets discolored? Sometimes it takes on a different color. So if it gets red, that means that there's war coming to the world. If it gets blackened, it means there's hunger coming to the world. Rashi explains people's faces get blackened from hunger. If it has both, then both things are coming to the world. If it happens all the way at the beginning when it's rising, that is a sign that there's a long way until the trouble is coming, because it's still early in the day, still a long time left. If it's at the end of the world, if it's at the end of the day, then it's a sign that the trouble is coming quickly, because there's not much time left in the day, and therefore it's going to be coming soon. Others say you switch it around. If it's in the beginning of the day, then you see that the trouble is coming quickly, because it's rushing in the beginning of the day to come, and if it's at the end of the day, then it's taking its good old time until a lot of the day has gone by, and it's going to be delayed. It is not happening so fast. Now the Gemara says, anytime any nation gets punished or gets in trouble, it's God, its false God is punished with it, like it says, I will punish the gods of Mitzrayim as well. The time when Klal Yisrael does the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they don't have to worry about any of these signs, the Gemara says, like the pasuk in Yirmiyahu says, Kayamar Hashem el derech hagoyim al telamdu me'oises shemayim al teichatu. Don't do what the goyim do, and you won't have to worry about the signs, the heavenly signs. Ki yechadu hagoyim mehema. The fear is the goyim have to be afraid of these signs. That the Evdei Chavim have to have fear of it, and the Jews, Klal Yisrael, does not have to have fear. Now, a list of brises, each discussing 4 reasons for some trouble. The first brisa says 4 reasons for a solar eclipse on an Av Beis Din, a leader of a court that dies and is not properly eulogized, on a girl who was engaged and was raped and she cried out and nobody helped her, for homosexual behavior, and for 2 brothers killed at once. There are 4 things that cause other heavenly lights to be eclipsed. They are people who write forged documents and contracts, people who testify falsely, people who raise small livestock in Eretz Yisrael, and people who cut down good fruit-bearing trees. There are 4 things that cause people to lose their money to the king. Those are people that hold on to already paid shtarais, that is a loan debt that was already paid up, but they hold on to try to collect it a second time. People who lend with ribis, people who could block somebody from doing any of these things and do not, and people who pledge publicly to give tzedakah and don't give it. Now, Rav says that there are 4 things that cause people to lose their money. That is people who delay paying wages, people who rob, who rip off their workers, people who shirk responsibility and throw it to somebody else, and people who are too inflated with their ego about their wealth. And the worst of all of them is this, that people are inflated with their ego. Okay, that ends the parak. Now begins the third parak, lulav hagazel, and it lists reasons that a lulav may be possible. A lulav, as you shall recall, is a palm branch where the leaves are not open yet, the leaves are still folded and pressed against the spine. Now there are 2 potential categories of psul, mainly, some other ones as well, but 2 potential categories of psul. One is that the Torah describes all the 4 minim as being hodar, they have to be beautiful. So anything which takes away from his beauty may be a psul. And also has to be lachem, it has to be yours, and it has to be full. So the lulav says as follows. First of all, a stolen lulav is pasul. That would be because it's not lachem, it's not yours. A dried lulav is pasul, that's not hadar, it's not beautiful. One that's from Asherah, from a tree that's used for avodah zarah, or from Irani Dachas, that's from a city where the entire inhabitants of the city are over the avodah zarah, or the majority of them, that's pasul because it has to be burned, and anything that has to be burned is viewed as if it's burned already, and then you do not have the minimum size. If its top is cut off, it's not hadar. If its leaves are ripped off and stuck on, that's also upsul. If its leaves are opened and sticking out like the branches of a tree, that's pasul as well, according to the Tanna Kama. And Rabbi Yehuda says tie them down and then it's okay. As far as what a lulav is, so it's generally the branches of the palm tree, but there's a certain type of tree called Tzine Hara Barzal, the bush of the Iron Mountain, that's also kosher for lulav. Now the minimum size of a lulav is 4 tvachim, that is 3 tvachim, the height of the hadassim, the aravas, and an extra tefach sticking up so that it can rattle when you shake it. Okay, the Gemara asks, are you sure that all these psulim apply all the days? Now, hadar, I understand, the Torah says it has to be hadar, and the Rabbanan, when they instituted the mitzvah, when they extended the mitzvah of lulav past the first day, because the first day is the only day that when it's obligated in for minim da'araisa. The rest of the days of Sukkot are only the Rabbanan. So when the Rabbanan extended it past the first day, they also extended the concept of hadar. However, the halacha of lachem, it only says by the first day. So if it's stolen lulav should not be a problem past the first day. First day has to be lachem. After that, it doesn't have to be lachem. So the answer is a different problem. It's mitzvah about avera. You can't do a mitzvah that comes about through an avera. You stole a lulav and now you want to use it for your mitzvah. You cannot be yotza with.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.